Call the meeting to order. If you'd please stand, and I would like to ask Mrs. Lindsay to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we have public comment, I would like to report that prior to this meeting, the board met in executive session to receive information from the township manager. We discussed some employee personnel matters. With that, is there any public comment on an item not on the agenda tonight? Does anybody wish to address the board on an item not on the agenda this evening? Seeing none, we'll proceed with our first item, which is a discussion with representatives from Benning and Scattergood, Inc. and Susquehanna Group Advisors regarding the status of township and authority indebtedness. Mr. Bova, Mr. Wenger.
Yes,
good evening.
I also invited Mr. Smida, fire counsel for the township as well, just so the full team here questions regarding legal matters and address those.
And Mr. Smida was so excited, he was here at 6 o'clock and ready to go. So, yes, very anxious.
He can blame me for that.
Yes.
All right, so we have on the screen is a presentation we put together. The purpose of tonight really is to, for the benefit of the new board members, to review the existing debt, what the projects did, what the outstanding debt is, and then there's a modest discussion on a proposed stormwater project, just to start the process of planning on your behalf. And so the first page, here we go, is just a summary of all of the township outstanding debt. And on the far right, you'll see we've broken out the allocation. Some of it is for township projects. The lion's share of your debt is for the township authority, and then there's a very small amount of debt that's allocated to the Friendship Center. And working kind of backwards, right to left, there were 3 different financings for the benefit of the Friendship Center to finance improvements over the last several years as the township worked to make the Friendship Center a more viable community asset. And so that required some improvements, and there's now about $2 million, or a little over $2 million of debt outstanding, resulting from a 2010 issuance of bond, a 2012, and a 2013. Again, on the township side, it's a relatively modest amount of debt, and so the highlight there is, from a rating perspective, you're obviously a strong credit, AA rated. When we present this to the rating agency, we really break out the components so that they can see what really is a burden from a tax perspective as opposed to system revenues from the sewer system, which the lion's share of the debt is. And again, there's about $114 million. You can see from 2014 through 2016, the township borrowed what is that, 30, 40, almost $70 million as we get into the improvements to the sewer system. There is a longer-term plan that will involve more financings. The township is in the process, or the authority rather, is in the process of applying for a PennVest loan that, if we can get in the queue, looks like it would be financed early in 2019. The plan right now is for that PennVest loan to be something around $10 million, so there will be a tail or residual amount of that project that likely will have to be financed with traditional bond financing to cover the entire cost of the project. So again, as you look at the stormwater project, and I don't know the timing of that, but our goal is to have as few financings as we can, just because you pay professionals every time you do it. And so the goal would be to combine as many projects at a time as we can.
Just the board members, you should be aware that the township has been spending roughly $1.25 million a year on stormwater improvements, and these are capital improvements in the field. We have been doing that on our most recent bond issue, where $5 million was borrowed for stormwater improvements. We'll exhaust those funds at the end of this year. Moving forward, there should be additional borrowings for more capital improvements. Would be my assumption that borrowing eventually would be offset or amortized through the stormwater fee.
And so just to highlight by way of refunding opportunities coming up, the 2009D bonds, which are taxable, they're Build America bonds. And so you'll see interest rates ranging from 6.245 to 6.345. They are taxable. The township does receive a subsidy from the federal government, so the effective rate is about 2/3 of those coupon rates that are shown. Those bonds are callable starting in October 1st of 2019. Under current Internal Revenue Code regulations, we can do a refinancing within 90 days of that call date. So essentially a year from now, June of 2019, assuming rates don't change, there should be a very good refunding opportunity. If we assume interest rates today, a year from now, the savings would be about $2.5 million. So fairly significant savings, assuming rates stay the same. Obviously, the forecast is for the Federal Open Market Committee to continue raising short-term rates as quickly as this week, probably another one in September, and maybe another one in December. Thus far, the upshot of all the rate increases has been slightly higher longer-term rates and higher short-term rates. Given all of the international events that are occurring, it is likely that short-term rates will continue to rise more than longer-term rates. So we are somewhat optimistic that a refinancing a year from now will work in spite of what appear to be planned and expected short-term rate increases. The other bonds of size and character that could be refinanced would be the 2014s, 15s, and 16s, those which are the last three on the page. Those call dates are not until 2024 and 2025. So we're several years away from having additional refunding candidates beyond the Build America bonds that were done in 2009. Any questions before we flip? That's a lot of information.
Yes, I have a question. So the refunding next year for the BABS funds would be roughly $42 million in
Yes,
refunding.
that's correct.
Okay,
Yep.
and that's would be the time to add new money as well?
It's ideal to combine refinancings with new money, yes. Yep. And you know, really, when it comes to the new money, the project's going to drive when we finance. But the earliest we could do a refinancing of that 2009 issue would be this time next year, meaning June of 2019. And just to highlight, as you look, you can see very low coupons. So, you know, while it looks like a lot of debt, your cost of capital is actually very low. You had the benefit of hitting the market on several bond issues at historic low interest rates. And so some of them will be refundable in the future, but some of these probably never will be just because of how low the interest rates are on the current debt. Turning to the next page then.
I'm sorry.
Oops, oh, I'm sorry.
I'll get it for you.
This just goes through then debt service by year for each of the issues. And so the page 2, which is on the screen now, is the general fund allocation. So that's the, that would be the non-Friendship Center and the non-sewer authority debt. Those are for just capital projects of general township use. Page 3 then is the Friendship Center. And just to point out, that's about, well, it's about $400,000 a year now. It drops in 2022 to $250,000. There's about 7.5 years left on that debt. So you're getting to where the Friendship Center will be debt-free. And then the next page, again, the lion's share of the debt is the authority's debt. And the highlight here is you can see annual debt service right now is about $7.2 million to $7.3. Peaks in about 10 years at about 8.7 and then starts dropping in the latter years. The debt service on the Build America bonds is in the first column. That's just under $2.7 million a year. The subsidy is about $875,000, so we net that out of the gross debt service to get to your net number. And I guess the comment I would make on all of your debt is as you look at the debt service on each issue, it's about the same each year. So it's what we call the Gary Chrisman mandate for level debt service. Want to make sure you.
He's a very level-headed guy.
I appreciate that as a and I will take it as a compliment.
It also serves really there is a more important purpose to that because of the scope of this authority projects. Some issuers would try to defer principal and make it level over time, but there are more planned projects, and so we're trying to do this in a very thoughtful fashion so that we're not just backloading debt at the expense of the ratepayers in the out years, that it will be a consistent rate structure throughout the term of the improvement projects. Next page, then, just for some context, is just interest rates over time. And certainly this goes back to 1990, and as most of you probably know, if you extended this back another decade, you would see even higher rates. But you can see we bottomed, kind of two bottoms, one in about 2013 and then again in 2017. We hit an all-time low in the 10-year Treasury of about 1.4%. 10-year Treasury today is slightly below 3%, so about 160 basis points increase over the last year in the 10-year Treasury rate. All of that with a very much improved U.S. economy, and the Fed is signaling that they're going to stop the easy money and start raising short-term rates. And so while rates have gone up considerably, we're still at very, very low rates when you look at it in a historical context. The next page then just gives you some markers of when the recent bond issues were done, 2014, 2015, and 2016. And so you can see the interest rate scale on the left side. The 2014 bonds were done in an environment where the effective bond buyer yield was just over 4%, and so the effective yield for the township's debt is actually a little less than that. 2015, it dropped below 4%, closer to 3.5%, and the 2016s were pretty close to that, a little higher than 3.5%. So again, in the context of doing 25-year money at under 4%, that is very, very efficient cost of capital. And then you can see we've had a bit of an uptick since 2016, but still hovering around that 4% long-term rate level. Next page, just a little bit of commentary, just to give you something, some context on what we might expect as we get into 2019. Certainly the Penvest loan, because it's essentially a subsidized rate, will be very inexpensive cost of capital even as rates start to rise. But as you look at other projects, including the Build America bond refunding issue potentially next year, so the Fed has really outlined three targets: maximum sustainable employment, stable prices, and moderate long-term interest rates. And so there's a little bit of bandwidth in all three of those so that they can never be pinned exactly to a point in time or an exact data point as to what they're doing. But the clear signal is that they will continue to raise short-term rates in fairly modest increments. And if you remember back to prior interest rate cycles, it was not uncommon for the Fed to raise rates at 50 to 75 basis points, given recent economic data. They've been very careful in this cycle to signal they want rates to go higher, but in what I would call a very gradual curve. So all of the increases to date have been a quarter of a point or 25 basis points. If we get to a point where they would come out this week or in September and those increases start to go from 25 to 50 basis points, you'll probably see the market react more negatively, meaning higher interest rates than they have to date. But the market participants have really liked the way the Fed has, if you will, telegraphed their intentions and the path on which they're raising rates, which really has led to a fairly stable long-term rate environment in spite of short-term rates rising and the expectation of continued rate increases. We're at an all-time low in unemployment. I think I read this last week where the number of unemployed is now less than the number of jobs posted. And so from a Federal Reserve Board perspective, what that really means is there should be pressure on inflation. There is kind of a growing theme that the e-commerce marketplace has really put a cap on the rate of increase for prices because of the competitive nature of, for example, Amazon buying Whole Foods. So Whole Foods goes from a premium price grocery store to actually discounting items because of their new delivery model. And so e-commerce has really changed the way businesses do business and the prices they charge, yet still remaining profitable. That probably, along with global events, will keep longer-term rates lower than some people thought would have occurred when the Fed started announcing rate increases. If we flip then to page 8, George, this then talks, let me just stop there and see if there are any questions about the current debt before we get to the stormwater. Okay. Page 8 then is, we just tried to give you a few things to look at. Again, level debt service. Scenario 1 would be a 15-year level debt service for $5 million of stormwater improvements. That results in about $420,000 of annual debt service, assuming current interest rates. You can see the existing township debt laid next to that, so it would go from about $1.6 million to just over $2 million for the next 10 years. Page 9 then is stretching that debt to 20 years. The annual debt service drops from about $420,000 to $340,000 to $345,000. So a fairly significant benefit from going from 15 to 20 years in terms of reducing the annual debt service. And then page 10, the next page, is amortizing that over 25 years. The annual debt service goes to $300,000. So the general rule is we generally finance long-term assets with long-term debt. We would expect stormwater projects to be a long-life asset. And so I think 15 is probably way too short unless you have some other plan that would come into play. 20 to 25 is probably a more realistic amortization schedule for stormwater projects. And again, the range then would be about $440,000 on 15-year, or $420,000 on 15-year debt to about $300,000 if you extend it to 25 years. In this rate environment where long-term rates really aren't that high, there's not a significant interest rate penalty paid, if you will, to stretch debt from 15 to 25 years. Page 11, Gary, you can close your ears for this one. This is a wraparound structure.
Okay, I already looked at it.
You ripped it out, right? And you can just see, you know, it does help the aggregate debt service on an annual basis. Again, a project like this probably warrants being done on level debt service as you have done the sewer projects, but that really is a policy decision of the board when you get closer to that time. Again, all this assumes current rates, so if we do get to higher rates a year from now, there would be, slightly higher debt service. Assuming that rates stay the same or close to the same, again, the Build America bond issue we expect will be a refunding opportunity that should save something on the order of $120,000 a year. So there would be some offset to a stormwater project if we could implement a refinancing at the same time.
Okay.
Questions? Mike, do you have any comments you'd like to add?
The only comment I would make is you're aware there was a tax bill this past.
Mike, would you come up to the podium, please, so we can...
Yes, sir. Thank you. Jay did a very thorough job. As I started to say, as you're aware, there's a tax bill that was passed last year. One of the provisions eliminated advance refundings for municipal debt. Prior to the passage of the tax bill, if you issued a $10 million bond issue with a 20-year maturity, you could do one advance refunding 90 days prior to the call date. So if that $10 million deal financing had a 5-year call on it, within 1 year, if rates dropped enough, you could refinance it. The elimination of the advance refunding, now you have to wait 90 days before the call date. So that dramatically reduced the volume in the municipal market. In addition, with the tax rates being lower for corporations, including banks, their appetite and need for tax-exempt debt has declined substantially to tens and billions of dollars. With the elimination of advance refundings, the volume in the municipal market is extremely light. We did a deal actually today for Upper St. Clair School District that the yield, the arbitrage yield on the bond issue was lower than the deal that we did in December. And it's because there's no supply this week. And we took advantage of that and put it in the market when there were no other deals being done. And because there was good credit, like Lower Paxton Township is, the bonds were gobbled up. So a lot of variables that determine where your rates are going to be. It's not just where the treasury is. And the supply and demand is always a variable. I just wanted to add that.
Okay,
Oh, good.
that makes
Thank you.
sense.
Thank you. I didn't realize that, especially with the new law and the impact.
Good and bad.
Yeah, but again, it's based on circumstances and timing.
Well, we'll see what the circumstances are when the time comes.
And Mike makes a very good point regarding credit. Being a AA credit goes a long way in the marketplace. So that's, you know, I know it's not the end all of how you do budget planning, but it's certainly when you access the marketplace, given the amount of debt you have and what the planned sewer projects are, that credit rating is very beneficial in keeping your cost of capital at as low a point as we can and optimizing demand in the marketplace.
Years ago, virtually all deals were insured. Because there were 4 different insurance companies, insurance premiums were relatively inexpensive. They provided a benefit, and you automatically received a AAA rating. After the market fallout in 2008, 2009, now there are 0 AAA insurance companies. I'm not sure what year it was, but instead of insuring one of the deals that we did, we decided to take it to rating and get the deal rated because you've got a very strong credit profile. And we were able to attain a AA rating, and that has proven to be very beneficial to the township moving forward, because you do not pay for insurance and you get rates that are almost on top of insured rates or AAA rated rates.
Mike and Jay, I continually ask this question too, because I always like to be proactive along with my level debt service, and that is I want to maintain the ratings that we have. So in anticipation, is this a time that we need to be looking at our rating and doing a review? And I'm not suggesting, I'm asking because you do this every day. Do we need to look at Moody's or Standards and Poor's for reconsideration? Or do you think at this time it's probably best just to ride with what we have as we move forward? Again, I'm trying to be proactive with this because I know the impact that has.
Yeah, so there are really 2 ways to answer that question. One is the rating agency has an obligation to review your rating at least once a year. So they
Right.
do that whether we ask them to or not.
Right, I understand that.
The other part of that is we don't request a rating because it costs money unless we're asking to refinance debt or to borrow more money.
Okay.
So the earliest, you know, we would come back for a rating would be whenever you want to do the stormwater project. We obviously don't need a rating for the Penvest loan.
Oh, okay.
But we're probably 6 to 9 months before we would request the next rating. But it is more than likely between now and the end of the year that George will get a phone call or somebody will get a phone call from the rating agency saying, you know, we want some information. We've looked at your audit. We just want to do a quick conference call to update things.
Okay.
So, you know,
I just want to make sure we're on top of that one because it does have an impact on everything that happens.
Yes.
Okay, I'm satisfied for now.
For now.
You caught that which followed the comma.
There's always something after the comma. Robin or Chris, do you have
I'm
any
good.
questions?
Yeah. Thanks for coming tonight,
Yeah.
Mike. Thanks for coming in.
Yep,
Yeah.
thank you. We
Thank you.
appreciate
Thanks for
the
making the
opportunity.
trip,
Just want to
Mike.
give you an update. Thank you.
Okay. And thanks
Good
for
to see
coming,
you.
Tom, even though you were an hour early.
Yes. And you didn't get the talk.
Do we have to say, no, we don't have to say, but we'd like to say goodbye.
So long.
I do have a follow-up.
Yeah.
Since we've had this report, when will we see you again?
2 answers. When you want to see us.
Well, that's a given.
So we try not to.
But, you know,
crowd your
when
agenda.
it's a phone call from either of you to say, it's time we need to look, because you obviously are looking at the picture every day. You know, we only get the picture when you give us a call and say, hey, we need to look at this because of, you know, rates, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, in our conversations with Bill, your spending pace has slowed considerably on a monthly basis for the project, so there's not a need to borrow money right now. So I think the next checkpoint really is when you find out what Penvest says formally with respect to the allocation, and then we'll be able to sit down and say, okay, how much money's left, how much do you need, and how much will Penvest cover, and what's left, and how are we going to cover that gap?
Right.
And that would be then the conversation to say, okay, is now the time to do stormwater? Do you want to wait? Can we tie all of it together with our funding a year from now, or do we need to do things before June of next year?
Right. Okay. Thanks, Jay.
Yep.
I just want to say
Oh, yeah.
what a pleasure it was working with George, the professionalism, cooperation on the deals. made everything a lot easier because the administration was always on top, providing us the information we needed with the rating agencies, working with bond counsel, the solicitor. Hate to see him go, but we're sure to get someone that will fill his shoes.
Thank you, Mike. Jay, thank you.
Thank you.
And as you can see, he's enjoying his retirement. We'll get you there,
Dress
George.
casually.
Yeah,
Yes, exactly. Still have the tie on.
still has on the tie.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jay. Appreciate it, Mike. Thank you, Tom. Okay, well, thank you all very much. And I guess at this point, we're going to have a bit of a discussion on issues involving the Coons Park pool. So, George Kunkel, if you want to share your concerns about the pool with us.
Well, I have concerns and questions.
Concerns and questions, okay. Make sure the microphone is on. Should be a green light,
Yep.
bright green light.
Here we go.
All right.
I joined the Coons Board in about 2013, and I started asking some simple questions that nobody could answer, and also some of the board members were making statements. We're talking about ownership of the pool and things like that, and how much land we lease from the township. And so I started doing some research. And first of all, who owns Coons Pool? One thing I know is that the original board members mortgaged their houses to build the pool, as far as I know.
That's
So-
correct.
George, can you pull the microphone a little closer to you so that we can get more amplification?
All right, how's that?
Oh, much better. Thank you. Very good.
So, I'm just raising the question. I don't expect to get an answer tonight. But it's interesting. Then, as far as the amount of area that Coons Pool covers as far as the tax maps go, I had a letter from George Wolf dated October 14th, 1996. This was back when the township was getting Coons Pool exonerated from paying taxes with Dauphin County and Central Dauphin. And point 5 was, the township shall redefine the lease between the township and the club to represent the land area within Coons Park that is actually dedicated to use by the club. Because when you look on the tax map, 2018, the tax area for Coons Pool is this whole upper end. And I looked at the tax, went online and found the tax information, and it shows that same area. So it looks like Coons Pool includes the pavilion, the bocce courts, the parking lot, and so on. I don't know if, I've never even seen a copy of the lease that the pool has with the township. I'd love to see one. And as far as what area Coons Pool is leasing. So who would you recommend I talk to?
I would be able to provide the lease.
Okay. I would recommend you talk to George.
That was very direct.
Yeah, we have a copy of the lease according to the
Right.
manager, or the retired manager.
I know.
Manager, consultant. What
It's
are we
like
calling you? That's,
Guy with the tie on.
guy with the tie on has a copy of the lease, yes.
Okay,
So yes, sir, we can provide you with that.
all right. And would I would assume it includes the area that we're leasing?
I haven't looked at the lease since the letter in 1996, so I'm not going to,
Okay.
you didn't ask me to get the lease out for tonight and review
Right,
it. I didn't
okay.
do that.
All right, well, I'll call you. The other situation that I have is, on the surface, Coons Pool is really making headway. We're getting gaming grants every year and making a lot of improvements, but there's behind-the-scenes problems that worries me a lot. First of all, we're a board of 7 people. I think we just gained another board member, and we do all the work. Well, 2 of us have had heart attacks and are getting old and aren't capable of doing a lot of this work. And I mean, we do all the work. We do the cleaning, the painting, the mowing, the finances. Mrs. Hoover, who handles all of the money, is almost 80 and not in good health. Now, she had some problems with the IRS, so we now have a company that does our payroll and taxes, which it makes it a lot easier. But I can see a time in the future, if one of these people no longer around, we could be in for some serious problems. We all know Walter, who runs the pumps, the filters. If he ever leaves, we would probably have to close the pool because nobody else knows how to run all that stuff. So I see a problem with a brain drain and labor. It's something that I don't lose sleep over it yet, but I could very easily. And the other thing along that line, the pool is almost 60 years old, and we're about one disaster away from being permanently closed. We just spent $3,000 running a new water line to the baby pool. And one thing I learned is that there's a lot of people in Lower Paxton Township that have fond memories of Coons Pool because 2 people donated that $3,000 within 2 days to help pay for it. Dick Freeburn, you all know who he is. He has a lot of fond memories of Coons Pool when he was a kid, and he has donated a lot of money to the pool. That's how we could purchase our paint. So, again, we're one disaster away from not opening. We opened late this year simply because of the weather. I'd like to plant a seed in the township, in the board's mind. Someday, they could take over Coons Pool. You already have an indoor pool, and that indoor pool already sends their kids to our pool for an outdoor pool experience. And at looking at the debt service for the Friendship Center, you could have Coons Pool for free. Now, just throwing that out for a future idea. We are going to try and become a 501c3. We are now a 501c4. And I thought, oh, wow. Then I saw what being a 501c4 gets you, which is absolutely nothing.
That's, no.
And I didn't realize, but we are actually incorporated because I have corporation papers here signed by Oscar Lingle. So, but I have, again, Dick Freeburn's put us on a friend of his who's going to help us with the 501c3. And I just was wondering if the township had any advice for that. So.
Well, if you have an attorney who's assisting you with it, the process for obtaining a C3, if you have an attorney who does that all the time, it is relatively simple. It takes time because the IRS moves slowly.
Well, that's good, isn't it?
It's not good whenever you want a C3 approved.
Right.
It is good if you owe the money. So, but yes, if you have an attorney who's assisting you, it's just a matter of paperwork, really.
Okay.
And are you asking for something specific from the township at this time, or are you wanting us to
Well, I know.
start thinking about where this is going to go in the future?
Well, you start thinking about where it's going to go in the future, and possibly lending us some physical labor. Walter and I and one other gentleman, we do all the power washing of the pool to get the paint off and do the painting and so on and patching, and that's a lot of work. And I'm not getting any younger, and Walter has a full-time business, more than a full-time business, and anytime he can get away from that's when he gives time to the pool. We're all volunteers, and some of us are older. I'm one of the few that I'm retired, so I can work all day long. I can't do that anymore. So if there's ever any time that we would need help, I'd like to have you consider that.
Mr. Kunkel, did you ever think about like the local Lions Club maybe helping, or the local Rotary Club as a community project, maybe helping
Okay.
with some of those tasks?
We have used Keystone Correctional Services in the past.
Right, okay. Okay.
And that's been, they've been wonderful.
Do you know what else you might want to look into? The Dauphin County Technical School. The students over there have been very involved. They've helped a lot at Heroes Grove. They helped us with the clock project in Linglestown. And the administration over there is very community oriented, and it could provide students with some practical experience. If you like,
Yeah, masonry.
they do have a masonry
Yes,
I know.
department over there. They do painting. I know with the clock, they put pavers in for us. Their landscaping department planted trees over at Heroes Grove. So there are different things that they do, and I know
Right.
some of the students have been very proud after it was done about their accomplishments and took pride in it. So you could talk with Peggy. I can get you contact information after
Oh, I
the
know
meeting.
Peggy Grimm.
You know Peggy Grimm?
Yep, the Grim Reaper.
Well, now let's not go there.
My wife taught with her at CD.
But Peggy is, as you know, phenomenal.
Yep.
And we've found them in different community projects we've done to be just enormously helpful.
I did have an Eagle Scout project
Mm-hmm.
at the pool 2 years ago. So,
And I should have you talk with some of our future Rotary leaders, because Rotary's been involved in rehabbing the bocce ball courts most recently over, which may in fact be part of your lease. We don't know. Maybe we've already helped and we didn't know it.
So, Mr. Kunkel, do people join as a membership? I know it's a public pool, so can you join as a membership, or do you pay daily? How is it when you
Either way.
come? Okay.
we now have 3 types of membership: family of 6, and they don't have to be related. You can have 6 people go together. Then we have couples rate and an individual rate, and anybody can walk in for $10 a day,
Well, that's not bad.
which not many pools do that.
Well, yeah, most of them are private, so
Right.
they don't take public, so.
So, but
okay.
we are a true public pool on Coons Park land, owned by the township. So we're almost halfway owned by you already.
Mr. Kunkel, have you been before the Park and Recreation Board at any time in the?
No.
Yeah, I'd encourage you to meet with them, and obviously, the Park and Recreation Board wouldn't be able to assist you financially as you have requested, or with in-kind services as you've requested, but they could certainly provide potential partnerships in programming and other activities that may benefit the board. And if you haven't been before them for a while, they probably don't know much about you, and it doesn't sound like you know much about them. I mean, it could be a good way to increase your partnerships with the township.
We've been doing pretty good with the money, so I think what we need more is manpower and woman power.
Well, perhaps we could push out onto some of our social media platforms the fact that the pool is open and the pool needs board members, it needs help, and Leanne could assist you with that. And sometimes it's just a matter of asking.
Well, that's what we did. We have a great Facebook page, and that's how we actually got our
Yep.
donations for the baby pool.
That seems to be the way to get things done these days, is go to Facebook.
And the scary thing is when we pulled out some of the pipes that fed the water to the baby pool, copper pipes that were in 60 years, looked like Swiss cheese.
Ooh. Wow.
Mr. Kunkel, over here, do any swim teams use the pool?
Yes, that's where we do get some of our help.
That's
Piranha swim team, and I don't know the league that they're in, but there's several pools that have swim teams, and they use our pool. Saturday mornings when they have a meet there's hundreds of people at the pool. It's amazing.
Well, they're pretty dedicated to their sport. And
Right.
maybe they could be a resource.
Well, we get help
do
from them.
use them. Okay.
One of their board members now just went onto the Coons Pool Board to help. And the one gentleman, his sons just started on the swim team. They aged in. And so they're going to be on the swim team for many years. So he's he's our professional painter now, so we are getting some
That's
help.
good,
Okay.
because they're very passionate,
Oh, I
very
know they are.
dedicated.
Yes,
And
they are.
it's good to tap them if you can. And just as someone who's relatively new here, thanks for all the volunteers and everything you're doing. Thanks for letting us know about this, and I hope you'll work with Parks and Rec, our board, so that going forward, there's a constant communication.
And just to let you know, I am writing another grant to Dauphin County Economic Development Gaming Grant. I'm only asking one thing, to paint the buildings. If you've ever driven by, you know they're in pretty sad shape. So that's our next
I think you
goal.
got grants the past 2 years, right?
We got a grant in 16 and in 15 and 17. I skipped a year.
Okay, so
thinking
15 and
I should
17.
skip a year. Well, then I see
Okay.
all these other pools every year they're asking, so
Right.
now I'm asking every year.
I know Devon Manor had gotten 2 years in a
Right.
row, yeah.
How much will you be asking for?
How about $22,000? I have, the painter is a professional painter who's on the, his son's a swimmer on the Piranha team. He's given us an estimate for painting everything. And so it's very local, keeping the money in the township. So,
I just want to let you know that Mrs. Bachnight was sitting right behind you, and she's the director of the Parks and Recreation. So she's sitting right there in the white, so that's who you would want to contact,
okay,
okay?
thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you
Comments?
for your time. We appreciate it. Okay, now we want to move on to a discussion with Triple Crown Corporation regarding the dedication of Stray Winds Farm Park. Good evening.
Good evening, Commissioners. Chris DeSanto here for Triple Crown on this issue. Kind of wanted to go over some background because I know not all the supervisors were members of the board when this plan was approved. But as part of the Stray Winds Farm Development Plan, Triple Crown agreed to dedicate approximately 10 acres of green space for parkland to the township and agreed to do about $1.1 million worth of improvements to that ground for the park. To date, our side of the improvements have been done. Mr. Wolf, you could go to the next picture down. This is an aerial view that kind of outlines the park that was shown here with the parking lot in, pavilion in, the playground in, and shows the walking trail that we have all, that's part of our.
Actually, Chris,
Yes.
maybe,
Okay, do we-
hold on a second. I got another one here that, where did I put it? Okay. I had another one. Okay, never mind.
That's actually even an older picture because across the street is completely developed now, and that's not
Right.
even shown there. So that's,
Give me one quick second here.
Yep.
I lost it. Okay, we'll go back to yours. I had it up and I closed it by mistake.
no problem.
Oh, jeez. There it is. I'm sorry.
There we go.
This shows it better with the striping as well, and you can actually see where the retention basins are in the park itself. And on top of the dedication and the improvements, Triple Crown still pays $793 per lot as a rec fee to the township. So this didn't get us completely out of a rec fee, but we still are paying a rec fee. But if you go back to ours,
Yes. Hopefully, maybe.
You had issues with that this morning.
Yeah, I did. That was a finger issue. My, wrong one.
if it'll load.
It should be loading.
So this shows the park with all the improvements completed from the park. You can see the pavilion, the playground, and the next couple pictures, I don't know if you have a packet, just kind of shows them up close. We put a bridge in over the creek and everything. If you could then just scroll to the last 3 pictures. I think it starts at picture 11. That's the parking lot, the walking trail. Lights have been installed, more walking trail, the bridge. And then the only thing that hasn't been completed as to date is 2 retention basins. And right now they are being used as sediment traps per the NPDES permit, and they will need to be converted. But that might not happen for a year to 18 months, depending on the lot sales and when the county says that we can go in and convert these ponds to their final state. So in the next one is just the other pond, and then the last picture shows the completed pond, and that's what it'll look like when it is completed. So what we're asking, which is kind of a unique thing, and we talked to Mr. Wolf, and he told us to come talk to you, is to accept dedication of the park, even though the last 2 ponds have not been completely converted yet. And just so you know, before we get into it, we are obligated to do those. There is security, there's a guarantee, improvement guarantee to the township to complete the ponds. And there shouldn't be any issues because the easements are recorded with the plan for us to access and finish those ponds. But all the active recreation area of the parks has been completed. It's being used like a public park by the community. It's been done for 2 years, and we've been paying all the maintenance and upkeep and everything on the active recreation parts of the park as if it were private, even though it's being used as a public park. In our conversations with the community is also at the point where they would like the township to take dedication, because the township, I believe, is planning to do some more stuff that we weren't obligated to do, like add picnic benches and things of that nature in the park. And after 2 years, it hasn't been done, and I think everyone's kind of ready to say, let's get that going and finish out the active recreation parts, and then Triple Crown will come in and finish those retention basins and convert them when we are told by the county we are permitted to do that, which we anticipate being in the next 12 months to 18 months.
I just had a question, Mr. Stein. Can we legally take that over even though the retention basins are not finished?
We can take it over. They have easements where they can access it. Work. We have the security in place, so there's a financial guarantee that they will be done.
Have we ever done this before?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
My question is to Mr. Wolf or Chris, if you remember. What's the date on the improvement guarantee?
I'm not aware of that.
Why, you said that it would be approximately 18 months until that's completed. And I know there's money in the improvement guarantee to ensure that that would be completed. I just want to know when the date is, because that also would be an insurance policy for the township.
Right.
I'm sure you can get back to us with that information.
Yeah, I don't have that off the top of my head. I don't know.
Or we can find the information as the case may be.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're totally insured before I'm willing to vote on acceptance. I know you've made the commitment, and I know you're making it verbal, and I know it's being recorded.
Right.
By the same token, I also know there's money there to complete it if you don't do it. But by the same token, I want to know when the improvement guarantee date is, because that could expire.
Yeah.
You want to make sure the improvement guarantee date is at least 18 months from now.
Oh, you definitely.
Absolutely.
Well,
Yeah.
You also have to post a maintenance bond for an 18-month period as well.
Right.
So the parcel will be covered under the improvement guarantee that will still have the detention ponds as an improvement, as a bonded facility, but there will also be a maintenance bond on the park improvements. And you've already provided to that's in your packet, board members, that maintenance
22,000.
is $22,000. So you'll be double bonded in essence for the parcel.
Okay.
Chris, I have a quick question.
Yes.
Why are you asking us now to take it over? Is it because we're at the beginning of summer and you don't want to cut the grass?
No, it's just.
I'm just being blunt.
Really?
It has been a 2-year period where we have maintained it. We've paid taxes on it. We've paid insurance to cover it. We've cut the grass. We've emptied the trash. We've done all the improvements. And I think just with our conversations with community at this point, I think everybody wants to maybe use it this summer and get the picnic tables in there and whatever else is going to go in there. So, you know,
Well, I
we've had
remember very vividly why we didn't take it before, because there were improvements that needed to be completed.
Right, and now they have all been completed, and you know, I think the pictures show. I took those today in a nice sunny day. It looks in great shape. The pavilion looks nice. The playground's there. The field is in really good shape. The walking path, I saw probably 4 people running on the walking path in the 10 minutes that I was there this morning taking pictures. So it is heavily used. I think a lot of people like it. I think people are just ready to have it be completed and, you know, maybe patrolled by police in the evenings and things that we can't do as a private developer municipality, if they owned it, would be able to do, you know, protect security and things of that nature. Not that it's would need it, but it's, you know, you drive by it once in the evening, make sure nothing crazy is going on.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to ask Mr. Wolf a question. Would our staff at this point in time, would they be ready to accept it, or are there still some things that they have reservation about?
We have no reservations in regard to the park facility, no. Obviously, there are things that the township has planned to do. Terry has in her budget, for instance, the purchase and installation of the park picnic tables as one item that needs to be done. So the park is ready. It's just on a parcel that's not complete.
So the issue for us becomes, do we want to accept it not completed, or do we want to accept it, or wait and accept it when the 18 months when it has been completed, or sooner?
Correct.
Thank
So-
you.
And the only incomplete items are the 2 retention ponds. Everything else has been completed.
And if you go back to the picture, one retention pond has been seeded and matted as part of its sediment control. So, you know, you can see the grass already starting to come up through it as it's draining out the sediment, as it's getting closer to its completed state. But there's still homes to be developed on this above tract, which is phase 3, which is moving pretty well now. I think there's 7 new sold homes in there this year. So hopefully that if the builder keeps that up, you know, it could be quicker than 18 months, which would be our preference as well.
Chris, on one hand, I'm thinking, yeah, we should take it over. We're ready to accept it. On the other hand, I have a concern, because if we do accept it, we have lots of families there with small children playing in the area, and they wander over to this area, and we have an accident. I know who's going to be liable.
To maybe
And
alleviate
I'm
that
not sure that I'm
concern-
willing to accept that responsibility at this point.
So to maybe alleviate that concern a little bit, where these basins are not where the active recreation portion is. So if you look on this picture, there is a small stream that runs across here and it comes up the hill. And this is actually the running path up in this corner. So it's not meant to be accessed, these parts. The active recreation
Yes.
is the field, is the pavilion, is the walking path that's above that and on the other side of the creek from it, and the playground, which is also on the other side of the creek from that. So I do understand your concern.
Exactly, and that is a concern, because I know children do wander off, and, you know, sometimes, I don't want to say parents are not as attentive as they should be, but I will say that. And so therefore, children do have a tendency to wander, and if they're not being properly supervised, I want to make sure that we don't have an accident. I just want to make sure that if I'm willing to accept this, that there's a sufficient natural barrier there to protect our children.
It's a pretty sufficient barrier. It's got vegetation.
Those are
and-
nebulous words, pretty.
I don't know if
pretty
you've been
safe.
out there, but that
I know there's
creek
no
is-
guarantees under any circumstances, but nonetheless,
It's got
I'd like to
it's
preclude
large
any.
trees, brush. It would take quite the accident for, I think, a small kid to wander over there, and it would take, you know, a teenager intentionally crossing the creek. for
Okay,
anything that.
as we're looking at this, it's Basin 6C, correct?
Yes. So this is.
And I see the tree, and you have the tree,
This is.
well, that, Basin 6C, well, and 6B and 6C are pretty much removed from where the area where children would be congregating. However, 7 is the one I'm most concerned about, because right there is, if you go to the white spot, for those who are just looking at the screen, that's the pavilion, that's the play area.
7B is the basin I showed you that is converted and completed. It's in its final form.
Yeah, Chris, we were out there 2 weeks ago today, and we did see the one that was completed, and I did question the one, the 6C there, because where the walking path was, it kind of like dropped off. And I had asked Mr. Wolf if there was going to be anything put up there, and he said no, because I had a concern of people do wander off, you know, kids, and because it is a drop. It is a drop from where the walking path, you know, the walking path is.
Right, but and then that goes into that natural barrier.
I
like,
know,
it's-
but it's still a drop off. Yeah. I was a little concerned. I had questioned that when we were out. I just worry about the liability, because kids wander.
Well, I can say, you know, we're not obligated to put a fence or
I
barrier
know.
up there anyways, so if that is a concern of the township, it might be in the township's best interest to take it and put a fence there as part of their improvements if they think that it is warranted as a safety measure.
Okay. Do we have any additional questions? All right, we will take that under advisement for the next meeting then.
How about public?
What's that?
Public?
Oh,
You know, Chris, I did want to thank you, because when we were out last year, the grass was just a mess. It was nothing but dirt, you know, there at the pavilion, and you guys did do a good job. I guess you brought in topsoil and reseeding and stuff, and it does look nice.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate your time this evening.
thank you. Do we have public comment on the issue? Mr. Epstein?
Good evening, Commissioners. George, good to see you again. You look great. Eric Epstein, Chairman of SWAN. We initially opposed it, but as the sands have shifted, we support the dedication. And just to give you a brief history, this is our last meeting, and we had one sentence on Stray Winds Farms. We were formed 12 years ago, went through 10 years of litigation, a number of years worth of settlements. To get a macro overview of the farm and the projects that we negotiated was an 8,400-foot walking pathway. It's a passive park. I think the barriers are sufficient. There's not one bridge, there's actually two. One that crosses the creek and then one that crosses a smaller creek. We have 150-foot barriers on each side of the stream per the agreement. We have bass almost up to the southern end, which is a remarkable evolution. The issues that were outstanding before, I think, had to do with some striping with the walkway. In addition, for us, and that was right before the Manor House, which has been sold also and is being privately maintained. On Paxton Church Road, we just completed one of the last parcels of their settlement with us, which is replacing 5 trees across from Carl and Flo Valley. We did that last week. There's an ongoing tree replacement going way back, if you know where the Snyders live, because the deer eviscerated those trees. So what we're going to do is we're going to wait to the fall, see what survives, and then put a plan together. But all the trees that were supposed to be planted are planted. The only thing left is the last prong to the walking trail. So if you walk the trail and it goes north, it's also going to go south when the final stage of the project is completed. So when I looked at my notes, really, I think we actually had a unofficial dedication 2 falls ago, but it was never dedicated because there were outstanding issues. I think Gary and Robin participated in that, where we did a photo shoot. I think what we're looking for is that the park is heavily used. It's also used a lot for a little soccer, for kids soccer. I think one issue that we did mitigate was water traversing Paxton Church. So all the issues that we negotiated and all the issues that have surfaced since the development began have been addressed. I'll be honest with you, we still have that little prong that needs to be built out. From the lower Paxton side, we have 48% open space compared to Susquehanna, which will get 11% open space. The accoutrements and the things that we were able to negotiate were fairly substantial. Although it's a 10-acre park, if you look at it, it's probably more like 18 to 20 because you're grabbing land that's moving north and south. It's a substantial area. I think to address your concern with the kids, it would be difficult for them to transverse that. I understand that, but there's a limit to what the kids can do now because there's really not a lot there. It's not only used by the folks at the Stray Winds community, and those folks, by the way, and that was one of our goals, have acclimated themselves seamlessly to Colonial Crest Association. We have about 250 homes. So one of the goals was when we settled this to make sure there was a seamless transition. We walk in their park, they walk on our side of the road. Of course, the western side of Colonial Crest is superior to the east, but we have to work that out amongst ourselves. That being said, it would be hard for me to deny Triple Crown this, absent the legal and liability issues being cleared up, deny them. I don't really look at it as precedential. I do share Gary's concerns. We did wait 2 years because there was some other value that needed to be extracted. That's absolutely correct, and I think it's good to have that historical paradigm. The one issue that's really become a little clearer is safety and security. When we did the park, we did a horizontal lighting, or vertical lighting instead of horizontal. Those are lead lights. So the lights are really not harsh on the neighbors, and it doesn't seem like something significant. That was a major point. You can walk the park at night. You can jog the park at night. You have light, and there's no light pollution. It was called the Dark Skies program, and people do it at night. I would like to have, if it's dedicated, I feel there's more police presence. I've also noticed there's been complaints at Via Tuscany with people hanging out, just gathering. I mean, kids gather and hang out. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it would be good to have, I think, a safety and security presence from the township. But to date, absent the tree replanting and the prong, I think all the elements that we negotiated have been implemented, and I know 2 years ago we opposed the dedication until the other issues were closed out, but I think we're at a place, if the guarantees are in place, if George and Steve can check that out, that I think it'd be a win-win for the community. It is the summer. It'd be a great place for the kids to go. I don't know if you have any questions for me, but to me, this is the end of a 12-year project, and it ended up being a win-win-win for everybody. It was a long, really process, but want to thank Chris for communicating to me, and then you are taking me out for dinner? All right, off the record. I don't know if you had anything for us, but I think Gary, more than anybody, has probably been here in the beginning when it's hard to imagine that it would turn out like this. So I want to also thank the township and George for getting involved, because you guys did have to show some vision in concerning waiving a portion of the park and rec fees, but it was money well spent.
Very good. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Eric.
Thanks, Chris.
Would anybody else like to address the issue? Okay, if not, we will move that forward to next week and go on to item number 7. We want to have a discussion with our staff regarding the preparation of a fall community event. This sounds interesting. George, Terry, and Leanne, what are we going to do?
Well, first of all, staff needs to come up to the table.
Staff needs to come up to the table. Ladies, come forward. You've been talked about a lot tonight, so. Yes, it is. Well, these are good things to have on the table for discussion.
Board members, I can tell you that Supervisor Lindsay has requested that staff investigate. Robin's idea was a Halloween parade, and Robin has talked about doing something in the fall for our community for several years now. And I don't want to speak for Robin, but I think she saw the positive impact upon the community with the 250th anniversary event, including the parade. I was hoping that a smaller scale event could be continued on an annual basis. Those discussions have been with myself and with Terry and with Leanne, but we haven't had any discussions with the board about an event, nor have we discussed it with the Park and Recreation Board. And as at staff, we've talked about doing a project. One thing we realized is that these discussions have been somewhat informal, and we don't actually have a budget for doing an event. So staff couldn't just move on its own without board authorization and approval. As you can see, we've had some informal discussions at staff level. We think a top-end budget for any type of event would be $5,000. I think we could do something less. So we're not talking a huge dollar cost item. We have talked about an event, and that would include a parade. We had hoped that Polly Murphy would be able to provide assistance to this group in doing that. But Polly has told us she's committed and is not available right now to do a fall event in Lower Paxton Township. So you'll be relying more on myself and Terry and Leanne to do something. So we've Leanne's put together this brainstorm list from a couple staff meetings that we've had. Does somebody else want to shut me up and give a little bit of review of what we've been talking about?
Some of the things that we were faced with when discussing doing a parade is that there are several parades in the area, and finding an appropriate date that would work, that we weren't competing with other communities. At the same time, we thought, why not do something different? We want to stand out from what other communities are doing. In the past, Terry has done hay rides and pumpkin carving. Why not piggyback that and turn it into a fall festival and have it be more of a Halloween/Thanksgiving right in the middle of the two? So we talked about the first weekend in November 3rd. I think we talked about Penn State has an away game, maybe. So more people will be in town for an event like this. And it would be an evening event that would still include the hay rides that are already done, but would add such things as a children's costume parade. So we're still incorporating the parade, just on a smaller scale. Food trucks, which have been successful at other areas in the township. We'd love to have that involved. A children's bounce house, children activities. These are just things that we threw together as ideas that could be included to draw people, and it would be at George Park. Other ideas included a bonfire, a pumpkin carrying contest, and music or bands, multiple or just one. But like George said, we considered a potential budget of $5,000. I think we can stay on the low end of that, but that would be something nice to be able to work with. Terry and Barb, the Friendship Center, would be the heads of the event, and I would help more with the marketing and promotion of the event.
The only concern I had was the evening, 5 to 9. It's dark. I don't know how well lit that's going to be out there at George Park for a 5 to 9.
Do you want to speak about the hay rides being at night?
Yeah, I know the hayride they always do. I've been out there that they do at night, but I was just concerned about all the other stuff with the kids running around with it being so dark.
We would have to bring in additional lighting,
Okay.
via potentially fire trucks. There are some.
Would it be good to do something in the afternoon? Or
Well, part of the fun of Halloween is the
hayride.
night, and the
Right.
hayride
Okay.
at night. I mean, it's a
Okay.
family-friendly hayride,
Right.
but
Okay.
we do start it typically when it's just about dusk.
Right.
So some people
Yeah.
who really want it in the light can have it in the light, but most people prefer it in the dark.
Okay.
The other thing, too, Robin, is the costume parade. I think if we did that earlier on in the evening, that if they're younger children and wanted to go home, the parade could be probably the very first thing that we do. It could be another way for us to showcase our fire departments by having the fire trucks there with their spotlights, and maybe the kids can climb on board or whatever. It could be part of an activity. I think that could be really neat.
Okay. I was just a little, because I knew it's going to be dark, 5 to 9, so I was just a little concerned about that. And I have been out to the pumpkin carving and the hay ride, so I mean, we do get pretty good turnout with that. Okay.
So what costume are you going to wear, Robin?
Yeah.
Board members, what we are looking at is trying to have a low-cost event, a low impact upon staff because we don't have Polly's expertise and assistance, and at the same time, a high-impact event. So we thought combining the hay rides, which we're already doing, with a children's costume parade and other events, and then bringing in food trucks, which is something that is very...
Well, that was a big hit for
Very
the
popular.
assessor.
Very
Yeah, that was very popular.
So the children would just parade around the park. We wouldn't shut down roads or anything because it'd be dark, and
Okay.
so it'd be a small parade right around the park.
Correct.
Well, that would be nice.
I guess It's a great idea. The only thing I'm thinking of is, do we do the National Night Out in George Park in August? And there's some similar activity, well, food truck, I guess, and certainly fire trucks. Just do we think is it unique enough to where it would bring people out again, same location, just a few months after National Night Out, which has the food trucks?
I actually think it would. Last year, we did National Night Out and the 250th in George Park, and I think the 250th built upon the National Night Out. George Park is of a size and has sufficient parking that it's good for these events. Where Coons and Brightville are just they're smaller scale. We've started to specialize a little bit. We hold the fireworks at Coons annually every year. We hold our concerts now at Brightville at Heroes Grove. So it's like one's our arts center, one's our fireworks center, the other's becoming our community party center. I actually think it's economies of scale. We're building upon the facility as opposed to becoming old and dry.
And I think the residents, they want community events.
Yes.
I mean, just hearing people after the Sester, can we do this next year? And when I told them approximately what the cost is, they went, oh, so they had so much fun. There was and you had the children's activities there, and you're looking at doing that again. So I think something on a smaller scale just to bring the community together, that people can meet each other and just to have our community involved.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
I know we do have to keep in mind just that we try to be as geographically as spread out as possible. I mean, George Park is unique, and there's no getting around that. And I love it. It's right a few blocks away.
And then, like Mr. Wolf said, we are using the other parks. We are marketing Brightville, for.
Well, there's a southern end too. We got to.
Yeah, that we do we do very well with Brightville, with Coons, and with George. We do not, Terry. What do we do anything at Cole?
Not on a public event,
The dog park's there. Yeah, but there again, that's a parking issue. There is definitely not enough parking to hold anything,
Well, maybe as we go forward, not right now, but maybe we'll think of maybe smaller things that we can be proactive on. I want to make sure we're not neglecting. Obviously, Linglestown is Linglestown, and gets so much deserved recognition. A lot of it's self-produced, and then now we got George Park. So, just as someone coming new to this, I just would like to make sure we just keep in mind, and because of parking and other things, maybe it would have to be a really scaled down thing. It may not be even pitched, or couldn't accommodate the whole township. But I don't know, just something to think about.
I mean, if you go over to Cole and you go to Lingle, there could
no
not be
parking.
you couldn't have an event there. There's nowhere to park.
And George Park is south side, so that when there's something at Brightville or something at Coons, that's north side, and
I mean, I'm on the
George is
southern end,
south
Chris,
side.
but I'm willing to come to George. So that's no problem. But I just think this is a great community. I mean, after seeing, National Night Out last year was absolutely awesome. The weather was great, and I'm sure we brought people in from other communities that came, and then to piggyback on the Sester, and we know that the Sester that people came from other townships to our Sester Centennial. So I just think this is a great idea. Just to have, we're a large township, and I think we need to offer community events to the residents.
And George, I appreciate you pointing out, since we don't have Polly's input and her expertise, that we have to keep in mind also that the staff and not putting too much, there is a lot of normal daytime things that the staff's expected to do, and we just want to make sure we don't come up with a lot of wonderful ideas that everybody else has to do.
Well, and remember, you have 5 extra bodies sitting up here. We can volunteer also.
Yeah, absolutely.
See you all out there.
Yeah.
Very good. I guess that's a green light to move forward.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Thank you for thinking through this. This is a great idea. The more community events we can have, the better. So
And just
thank
let
you.
us know what we can do to help. So we're here to help. Right, guys?
Yes, ma'am.
Yep.
Whatever you
For
say.
Chrisman, I don't hear you.
I'm just observing.
He's going to be busy mowing the grass over at Stray Winds Park, so.
Thank you, Tim.
Okay, now we would like to have a discussion again with staff, and we are going to talk about providing, we're going to talk about providing information to citizens on the proposed federally mandated costs and the stormwater fee needed to pay for them. Mr. Judd, you've been doing some work on this. Do you want to fill us in?
Yes, sir. Leanne and some of our consultants with Revtelis, and of course our township manager have been working on the first really direct communication with ratepayers in regards to the stormwater fee that's coming down the pike. We've of course had many public meetings. We had several public presentations, and this will be a bill insert that goes out with the next sewer bill, which will be the first direct communication with ratepayers. And so we want to try to capture, as much as you can in an 8.5 by 11 insert, where this came from, how we got here, what the requirements are, and what to expect going forward. Now, it's a lot, so this will be a very general overview. I know we have the letters up on the public agenda. It may not be the very, very last draft that we worked on, but it's mainly there. And this will be going to the printer tomorrow, and it may have one or two tweaks on it, but this is essentially it, and just explaining, number one, up front, not to point fingers, that's not very productive, but we do have to make it clear that these are mandated costs, mandated commitments, many of which we would have made perhaps on our own at some point. I think personally I wouldn't have timed it to where it takes place when we're also under a court order to make all kinds of sewer system improvements to where people are seeing those costs show up on their sewer bill. I don't think as a township we would have planned to do these two massive system upgrades and infrastructure investments to this degree at the exact same time. That's just me talking, but I think it's important that our first communique with ratepayers, that they understand the nature of this, that it is an unfunded mandate, federal and state unfunded mandate. Just to get that clear so that we don't spend too much time debating whether or not the township should do this, because that unfortunately is not up for discussion, not up for debate, and it's something that we do have to do. And the community and certainly the federal government's involvement is the Chesapeake Bay, and that we make sediment reductions here in Lower Paxton, as do all the communities that feed into Chesapeake Bay, and ultimately it has an environmental benefit. But for the folks here, they need to know it's required. We chose not to use taxes to do it, because this, as we spoke many times, and we will speak many times going forward, it's a broader fee and a more fair way to do it. So this will be a general explanation that the folks will get in their bills. There's one graph which simply shows the amount of stormwater expenses that the township currently pays and the amount that we'll be paying beginning next year. And then this will kind of be used as the jumping off point for our webpage that we're going to put together, and we'll drive people to, and going forward we'll be adding supporting documents, and most importantly, meeting information. As the letter points out, we will have several public meetings between now and the end of the year to make sure that the general public and the stakeholders, businesses, school district, and other large property owners who will be impacted by this, so that they will understand what's happening and why. So this is our first direct communication. Leanne handled the the heavy work as far as getting the pen to paper, and I think it's about as good as you can do in a sewer bill insert. Leanne, is there anything else we should mention?
I hate, because I know Mr. Judd, Leanne, and the people from Rathtellis have been back and forth, and I have reviewed, but my brain doesn't always kick in as fast as it should.
Tweak it right up until.
Well, one tweak, board members, we're showing 2018 and 2019, like status quo is 2018. But we have ramped up since the beginning of our first general permit. And I'm going to say that's around 2010, 2011. Our stormwater spend on an annual basis prior to our first general NPDES permit would have been less than $1 million on an annual basis. It would essentially consist of the yellow, the baby blue, and a tenth of the dark blue. So potentially the normal spend for the township up until the federally mandated improvements have been required was $1 million in 2010. We're now at $2.5 million a year, and we're expected to go to over $3 million a year. Would adding that first year expenditure show the progression in the cost and make it more understandable to the citizens why a fee is imminent?
So you want to add a third bar
Yes.
using 2010 as the base year?
2010, whenever the year before our first NPDES permit, which is about 2010.
And I think that's fine. More
Yeah.
perspective's better. The only reason we had two there is because we referenced.
I understand. That was in our, that was, I
Yeah.
But I
understand.
like the base.
But
Yeah, using
historical-
2010 as, it's a more, the 2010 spend is more accurate from where we are starting from rather than the 2018.
That would be, if you would ask me what our base amount would be, that would be our base year.
Well, then we ought to add that third.
And
I think the visual will help.
can you
the
call
individual.
it up real quick, George? That we're talking about
Yes,
it?
I can.
On the-
I'm
it's on the
sorry.
agenda.
I'm
And when we
one
say
of myself
permit,
here.
this is the permit we received a few years ago to.
Here we are.
That explained how we had to reduce sediment. They were
Correct.
outlined, and you get the permit, and then you're obligated to meet
Correct.
the obligations of that permit.
And we're now waiting for our next permit, which we applied for last September, and still not have had comments on our application.
Okay.
Are they just running behind?
They haven't commented to anybody yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know, well, it's,
Don't ask.
we're being told to, irrespective of receiving comments on the permit or receiving the permit, we should be moving forward.
Right, which we are.
So what I am suggesting, board members, is we got 2018 expenditures now, which include the plan review, the Public Works Department efforts, and the capital improvements, which we've been making. We got 2019, which include those same costs, plus the expected costs for sediment removal, which are in the gray. But if we'd go back to before we were doing the capital improvements, which was 5 years ago, our annual operations and maintenance costs for stormwater would be about $1 million. That would be our base
That
cost.
bar should be added to the, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. That does show a more accurate picture.
And just to reiterate, this is just the first official communication with the ratepayers, and we'll be adding a lot more information. I know as we go along, I think it's important that we take the time to explain what the money will be used for. It's very important that people can get a real grasp of, that it's not just going into some pot somewhere and it's, they want to know what it's being used for. And that's all you can do is lay out, A, we have to do it, B, this is how much it's going to cost, and this is how we're going to get there, and this is what the money's being used for. So this is just the opening communique, and we'll build on it. And again, the goal is to have a web page that continually grows with new information. Obviously, the next opportunity for communication to this degree will be the fall sewer bill. We have our mailed newsletter, and then those meetings which will be taking place. And hopefully between mailed information and the website and, of course, social media, we just want to make people know about these meetings and keep everybody as informed as possible.
I was just wondering, would it be a good idea through the meetings, through the website, through the newsletter, to eventually put in there some of the projects that we have already completed so that they know what the money before was spent for? Because they might not realize, well, what is the stormwater? What has the township done, with stormwater? So maybe if they know.
Would those be, many of those be the same thing?
We've done a lot of pipe replacement in various locations of the township over the last 5 years.
So I mean,
they can be identified.
the locations and stuff are going to change, obviously, but the
Yes.
the equipment, the processes, the buffers and everything else are essentially in many ways the same. So, I mean, a photograph of, infrastructure that we did prior would be a good illustration of something that's going to happen in the future.
I just think too, if we put a list of where those projects, because they might be in some residents' neighborhoods and did not realize that had taken place. So, and they're like, wow, I benefited from that, but not know, they didn't know.
I think it's very important, Robin, to make the connection between.
The more you can get out to the residents.
Because the only
don't
thing that
understand
we
it.
see, and we're all ratepayer, the only thing we see for sure is the bill. So
Right,
that
and that's
much
why
we know.
the more you can educate on what is stormwater, what is their money going for, projects we have done over the past 5 years, I think, they
And it's-
need to know that.
You're not going to see a big shiny new building or new
Right.
road. These are pipes underground.
Right.
These are streams, and you don't
But
necessarily.
locations where
Oh,
they
yes,
have
no,
them,
absolutely.
yeah.
And you don't necessarily see the rehabilitated creek. You don't necessarily see
Right.
that. You don't see the water levels necessarily. So
Good. Well, we will do all those things, and we will continue to talk about it at all of our public meetings and continue to point out that this, $3.5 million a year is as a result of federal and state mandates. However beneficial the projects are, we have no choice but to do them, and I'm sure once people start seeing the fees show up on their sewer bill, there's going to be a lot of comments, so the more we can get out there before that occurs, the better. Okay, with that,
Can I just make a comment, Mr. Henry? This morning, Mr. Wolf and I attended the Greater Area Harrisburg Realtors Seminar, and Mr. Wolf was one of the presenters, and there were a lot of questions on, what we're doing and what some of the other municipalities are doing. In fact, this same thing, Mr. Wolf had passed out, and people were definitely commenting on it, and I wanted to thank him. He did represent the township and did a great job. So it was very interesting just to hear what other townships are doing, with the stormwater.
Yes.
So unfortunately, we have a bigger obligation than most of those townships do.
well, yes. Okay, with that, we will move on to item 9. We're going to review a proposal from Dauphin County, and they would like to include the bridge on McIntosh Road in a multi-municipal replacement program. Mr. Wolf.
Yes, board members, this is going to be a very quick discussion. Dauphin County is very proud of its efforts to see that its bridges and the bridges within its municipalities are brought up to an acceptable standard. There's right now 12 municipal bridges in Dauphin County that are substandard. We happen to own one of those, and they want to help us replace it. That is the McIntosh Road Bridge. We saw that on Road Tour. Replacement cost is $825,700. It was built in 1940. As you'll remember from Road Tour, or maybe you won't, you barely notice it when you drive over it.
Yeah.
It's not the Golden Gate Bridge. So, board members, replacing bridges is expensive. We're now going to, or will shortly be going to construction on replacement of the Jonestown Road Bridge. That is a substantial structure by our standards. We are in design of the Red Top Road Bridge. Both of those bridges are funded by federal and state bridge funds. Lower Paxton Township is contributing 5% to Red Top Road, and Lower Paxton and West Hanover are jointly contributing 5% to the Jonestown Road bridges. There is no such commitment by the state government or federal government to replace the McIntosh Road Bridge, but Dauphin County is willing to commit to providing 60% of the estimated replacement costs, or roughly $500,000. If Lower Paxton Township is willing to commit to 40% of the costs, $330,000. Board members, there's a time schedule. We don't have to send a check tomorrow. The project would go in accordance with a time schedule that intermunicipal agreements would be entered into later this year. Pre-construction activities would go through December of next year, with bidding and awarding of replacement of the 12 municipal bridges to begin in January 2020. So we would have time to fund this. I personally think it's an excellent way to replace a municipal bridge. Moreover, Lower Paxton Township's engineer has been retained by Dauphin County to do this project, these 12 municipal bridges, as a package. So they're also working on the Red Top Road and Jonestown Road bridges for us. So we wouldn't have to worry about changing engineers in replacing this piece of municipal infrastructure.
Very good.
Wow. I
Two
mean, if they're willing to pay
questions, Mr. Wolf.
60%, yeah.
Mr. Chrisman.
2 questions. Question number 1, our 40%, when is, excuse me, when is our check due?
That would
On or
be-
about?
Yeah, on or about, and that would be as expenses are incurred, and expenses would start to be incurred during the design phase. I'm expecting that if we would agree, we'd start having expenses next year as part of our
Oh,
budget.
okay. My concern was that the check needed to be generated before December the 30th, because obviously we're going to need to budget for this amount of money in next year's budget.
Correct. And Dauphin County is working with the other municipalities that have bridges, and an $800,000 bridge in Lower Paxton Township is not, it's not an insignificant amount of money, but it's certainly something that we can plan and prepare for. An $800,000 bridge to any of the much smaller municipalities in Dauphin County is a huge undertaking. So the county is working with those municipalities on how they're going to fund it. Some will have to issue bond funds. I've talked to the county representatives about the potential for them to actually fund a portion of the 40% owed by the municipalities through the local share program. Because I said, all of us, all 12 of us are going to submit an application for
For the
local
same
share
thing.
funds. So why
Sure.
don't you simplify the process? So that is under discussion as well.
Good.
But I would encourage the board to agree to participate in this program and authorize moving forward. And I could place this on an upcoming board agenda for formal action, should you be willing to do so.
Well, getting 60% of the cost covered is better. Down the road, we might end up having to pay for 100,
Right.
Correct.
assuming the bridge even lasts
So
It was
I
built
assume
in
our action.
1940. Do you remember that?
No, it was it was my grandparents' generation.
Well, just, Gary, do you have a question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we need to take formal action to participate or to accept, correct? And then we need I know that you're not here full-time any longer, but somewhere the footnote needs to be placed with budgetary preparations to throw that amount in. And we probably should budget for the 40%, even though there's continued discussions to even reduce that further.
Do we have like a master list that we keep of what we think, structures and major roads?
Yes, we do. Our bridges, we have 9 municipal bridges. They're inspected either annually, if they're substandard, or biannually under a program by Dauphin County. They do our biannual bridge inspections, telling us what maintenance needs to be done, programming bridge replacement, and the engineer for Dauphin County happens to be HRG for the bridge inspection program. We have been very proactive with our bridges. Lower Paxton won't have any substandard bridges after McIntosh, but of course by the time McIntosh gets done, something else will come up.
So this was going to be on our radar.
Yes.
Anyway.
Yeah, you'll do Jonestown by the time, if the county moves at its schedule, Red Top Road and McIntosh will come together about the same time.
And then we'll have no substandard bridges unless something additional develops.
Correct.
It's a good position. It's a good position. Okay. I gather then the board's in agreement that we should schedule this for next week's agenda. Okay. And now we do have an issue relative to defects in Ordinance 1715, creating a volunteer fire service tax credit program. Mr. Wolf and Mr. Stein, which one of you wants to take this?
I'll start. Board members, we have implemented the earned income tax portion of the credit for volunteer firefighters. That was very easy. I've actually waited for somebody to create a form for the real estate tax portion. Nobody else has done so, so I began about 2 weeks ago to create the form for volunteer firefighters to submit for reimbursement for the real estate tax credit. And in doing so, I realized there's defects in our ordinance. And they're relatively minor in nature. I believe with board direction, they can easily be corrected, but I thought we should discuss them here tonight. First of all, there's no definition of residential real property other than residential real property. Question that I had as I'm doing this is, what happens if you're in the village of Linglestown and the property you own and live in happens to be commercial on the first floor and residential on the second floor? Are you getting a real estate tax credit for the commercial portion of your building? That's not defined in this ordinance, so I wanted to point that out. Moving on, board members, the eligibility period for tax credit goes through a calendar year period. That's one date to keep in mind. So you're eligible for taxes paid in 2018 running from January 1st to 2031, through December 31st. However, applications shall not be accepted by the manager after April 1st.
Little problem.
And then it goes on to say that
A little bit of a problem.
under this volunteer service credit program, they shall be eligible to receive a real estate property tax of up to 20% of the municipal liability on qualified real property. If the tax is paid in penalty, then only the tax credit shall only apply to the base tax year liability. Right. But if your application is due in April, you can't pay in penalty. Right. So that doesn't line up. So we kind of need a definition of real estate, and we need, are you willing to allow a credit to be paid on taxes that are paid in penalty? Are you, and there's nothing in the ordinance that says so, but there's nothing that says against it. Are you willing to allow it to be paid on delinquent real estate taxes? So before we prepare a form, we kind of need some answers.
Steve, I'm going to ask you, what do you say, the wording that we should use where it says real property? What would you plug in there?
You're talking about the first page?
Yeah, qualified real property, what would you?
I think I mean, in my mind, it shouldn't include anything that's commercial. It should be
Okay,
all.
I agree.
It's either, it has to be 100% residentially used. That would be my thought on that one.
What if the building is part commercial, part residential? Could they get a credit on the residential part but not the commercial part?
If you want to do it that way, and we can do it kind of any, but if there is a commercial part and a residential part, we have to figure out what the, how the taxes are divided up among that.
The problem you would have is that there would be no separate assessment for, the property would be assessed as,
Yeah.
As one.
right.
Yeah.
Doesn't the state drive some of this? I know it's a local tax, obviously, but was this, our ability to do this, wasn't that enabled by?
That was enabled by state legislation.
It doesn't
The
get in-
ordinance that, if you Google what others have done, they've all used this sample ordinance, which came from the Pennsylvania Municipal League. This is out there in many municipalities. I don't know what others are doing about it, but there's some
But state
minor
law
flaws.
doesn't get into.
Correct.
How to define.
It's very general.
Okay.
Doesn't provide much in the way of detail.
And PSATs, obviously, they don't have a model,
They use the same one.
they use the same one.
Yeah, the Pennsylvania Association of Boroughs uses the same one. They all
Okay.
these.
Well, it was unprecedented, I imagine, so this is working out the kinks.
Okay, so what we need is, we need a definition of what real property is.
Correct. Residential real property.
Residential real property. So if we add a paragraph defining residential real property, that should clarify that. Then you have a timing issue.
Correct. And then you have the delinquent issue. Do you want to,
If somebody pays their taxes in the delinquent period,
No.
should they get
No.
a break?
I personally think no. I don't think, because, when you pay the penalty and stuff like that, that's going to give you more, you're going to get more money.
well, no, you only get, you only get it on the base, no matter what.
Oh, okay, then I'm glad you
Okay.
clarified that, okay.
Yeah, that's
okay.
a different-
I was thinking that it would
Yeah.
be the whole thing. But maybe by doing this, it'll make them pay their taxes on time.
So what you're saying is that you would prefer not to make
That they couldn't.
this eligible for delinquent tax payment?
Or,
If they're in a penalty period, the penalty period is different than
Yeah,
delinquent.
penalties on your bill.
Right.
Penalties on the
plays
bill,
on the bill, yeah. But the delinquent,
Delinquent's a whole, that then kicks a whole lot of other expenses
Yeah.
in for governmental entities.
yeah. I mean, that's just my view on it.
Well, and also penalty, we're still receiving the funds in the same fiscal year as you're providing the
Right.
credit.
Right.
If it's delinquent, you're not.
Right.
Correct.
So what I'm hearing is that our policy should be to allow the credit for payments in the penalty period, but not for delinquent payments.
That's what I
Yes.
would do.
Correct.
That's what I would do.
That's,
Yes.
okay, I'm seeing everybody nodding yes, so it's-
With that, then, board members, I would recommend that the submission deadline be December 31st.
Right, that's
Okay,
what,
yes,
that,
yes.
that would just follow suit.
And just as a reminder, or for people learning about the first time, the whole point of this is as an incentive for
Correct.
people to serve in our volunteer emergency services.
Correct.
So that's the whole point of it.
Yes, this board has authorized a earned income tax credit of up to $500 and a real estate tax credit of up to 20% of the municipal portion of residential real estate tax for volunteer firefighters who meet established thresholds of service to this community.
George, the earned income tax, what is the percentage that they get?
It's not a percent, it's up to 5, it's not a.
So what is the qualifications to get up to
Okay, let me go back up to it.
Because I know we've
It's right
done that,
here.
it was a while ago.
It's right there. A credit of up to $500 is less than the amount. Yeah, so if your earned income tax payable to Lower Paxton Township is $500. You get credited for all of it. It's not a percentage, it's the first 500.
Oh, it's the first 500, okay. Has anybody applied yet?
Oh, I'm sure that that's being done through Keystone.
Oh, so we don't, that all goes through Keystone, we
Correct.
don't see
That's-
anything?
Yes.
Okay.
Any additional questions or
But
comments?
they can only do one or the other, right?
No, they get both. You gave them
They
both.
can get, we gave them, oh, they could do both?
Yes, they
Oh,
can do
I thought they
both.
had to choose one or the other. Okay.
I think we resolved two of the three issues. The first issue is the residency. The
We
residential,
did resolve that.
the residential real property?
Yes, Steve is going to develop a definition for
okay, he's going
residential
to
real
develop-
property, which will be added to the ordinance, yes.
Yeah.
That's fine, okay.
Yeah, we do need to define it, yes.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So I believe we've addressed all three concerns. Very good.
Board,
Then,
we'll prepare the amendments, advertise the ordinance, and schedule it for public hearing.
very good.
Good.
And item 11, ought to know, status report on CapCog intermunicipal effort to negotiate our next cable franchise agreement with Comcast.
Right.
I
Or-
gather they're not going to lower rates?
Well,
Why are you laughing?
Actually, that's not, as much as we'd all like lower cable television rates, that's not beneficial to Lower Paxton Township.
Yes, we get less money.
Right. So far, 14 municipalities have agreed to participate in the Capital Region Council of Governments cable franchise review and negotiations for a new franchise term with Comcast. The review will be designed to determine whether or not Comcast has complied with the requirements of the existing franchise agreement. And the negotiations will be for a new agreement term, which will be, I believe, 10 years. Given that 14 municipalities are participating in this intermunicipal effort, all municipalities participating will receive a 15% cost reduction from that proposed by Cohen Law Group. And Lower Paxton Township's cost, based upon municipal size, with the 15% cost reduction, will be $8,925. So the process is moving forward. I just wanted to let you, and you've already authorized our participation. I just wanted to let you know that it is moving forward, that we are getting a reasonable cost reduction, and this is a process that, if it begins now, will take probably 6 months for the review to be completed and another 6 months for negotiations to be completed.
I'm just disappointed that we didn't have as many municipalities as what they thought.
You always hope for more, but 14 isn't a bad number.
Do you know who did it, how many there were the last time?
I,
Were there more?
I believe there were more
Okay.
last time.
I was just curious if there were more, why aren't they participating this time?
Well, and it could be less because Hampton is saying they're only in if
Yeah,
they
I
get
saw
to
that.
26.
Yeah, so it could be 13 instead of 14.
So that's why I'm saying, would we consider that or not? I'm going to guess no. We
I
wouldn't.
would.
Pay more, wouldn't we?
I think we would. I'll yield to George's.
There's no way I would go this on our own.
Oh,
And
okay.
Mr. Stein, who is counsel, is shaking his head.
Okay,
This is
we're in.
You're not gonna get a better deal than that, and you have a firm that's pretty much all they do. So they really, I think they do a great job, because the cable industry changed. I
Right.
mean, from the early days.
Yeah.
You know, it's changed dramatically, especially after the feds enacted the Telecommunications
regulations.
Act. I mean, it just changed a lot, and you have to be somebody who does it all the time to
Yeah.
really be able to keep up with Verizon and Comcast.
The specialty.
It is.
Very highly specialized. I can't imagine that we would get a better rate than $8,000 for negotiating something like that.
I can't believe
I
you
can't.
would.
Steve, you wouldn't do it for less than 8,000?
I wouldn't do it at all.
Wouldn't do it at all, okay. No, that seems like a very favorable rate for negotiating something of that complexity. Okay, thank you, Mr. Wolf. Improvement guarantees, development agreements, plan reaffirmations, I see none.
There are none.
There are none, okay. Well, this is good. That having been said, I do not see any other items on the agenda for this evening. Does any of the members of the board have additional comments or issues? Seeing none, then we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved. Is there a second? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Thank you. We're adjourned.
I think we had